Hello, everyone. My name is Luba Vangelova, and I am the founder of The Hub. And I am joined today by Stefanie Palazzolo, I believe is how you
Palazzolo.
pronounce your name. And I will let her take it away to introduce herself and what she does.
Thank you so much, Luba. Okay, so Palazzolo, Stefanie Palazzolo. It's a very stereotypical Italian last name. Hi. Okay, so I'm based in New York. I'm from New York City, and I've lived in Long Island for the past 5 years now, which I love. So I have an education background that goes pretty far back. I started tutoring and doing like extra homework help in some of the domestic shelters around New York City as part of my undergrad experience, and then finished with a teaching degree and an educational policy minor. I taught in a couple of different types of classrooms around New York. We're talking like public school, charter school, private school. I got like the run of the mill for the ins and outs of these different types of schooling and families and neighborhoods. And I eventually decided I loved being in the classroom, but I also saw lots of issues with the system overall. And, it was probably because of the policy background that I had just, come from, and moved into administration with what's called the Federal Magnet Program of America. So the Federal Magnet Program gives grants, very large grants, to a handful of schools a year. Like they get thousands and thousands of applicants a year, and they give it out to four usually. And one of the schools was based in New York, and I was given the job of like the overhauling and grant management of this very large public school. So in doing that, and that took me all over the East Coast, and then to the Midwest, and then to the West, to see how schools are running well or not, and why. Diagnose some issues. And the insight I gained from that was absolutely wonderful, because what happened next when I was in the last year of the grant was I gave birth to my son, my second child, and COVID happened all in one shot. So it's like I had all this experience. I just had a baby, so I was home anyway, and a pandemic just hit. And the last year of the grant became a virtual thing, where instead of continuing the work I was doing, I actually started offboarding families from the school system and into homeschooling. So a lot of families were already homeschooling around the country, but the boom that happened became like a phenomenal thing that, if it hadn't been for the pandemic, would it have ever been that much of a boom in one shot? So a lot of people decided, instead of moving to remote learning or hybrid learning or some sort of different school system setting, that they were just going to completely remove their child and homeschool. So I had done this, for the past few years around the country as part of my work, but now it became like the basis of my work. So I was just like thrust into working all over the country with families to do this, and so this was born. So for the past number of years, I've been the owner of my homeschool expert, which started in specific cities and branched out to be all 50 states. And it's coaches and consultants for homeschooling families that are also parents and educators by trade. So you're getting like the best of both worlds in the advice, the tips, the coaching, the consulting, the legal issues, the paperwork. It's like top tier information in one phone call. And that's who I am and what we are.
And you mentioned you're working with parents of children from very early ages all the way through like the late teens.
Yeah. So, I mean, you would think it would be mostly grade age children that have to submit some sort of state and district paperwork, but that's not what it is. We get phone calls from, 1-year-olds who the family wants to get the information now or start like the nursery school, preschool learning in the house. all the way up through high school, college application process, and even sometimes beyond. We also get a couple of different types of like adult learning situations that want help as well.
And so, do you see some common themes in what parents are coming to you for? Um, is it mostly parents who are considering homeschooling but are facing fears and concerns and need to be talked through those? Or do you get more, parents who have started doing it and then kind of, I don't know, panic or whatever, and do these things change depending on the age range of the children?
Yeah, so I'd say we get an even mix, and it definitely does change as the age range goes up. So um, part of it is I want information. We're really thinking about homeschooling for X, Y, and Z reasons. And even those reasons have, common themes, especially depending on the child's age. We can go into that as well. So it's like, I want to homeschool. I don't know how. I don't know, what even the first step is, or how to fill out the paperwork, or what to say to my district. How do I withdraw? What do I do after that? Like, what do I do every day in the house? People who want to know what their child should be learning. They want to do it, themselves, but they also want to stay compatible with their peers and what they're learning in some sense as well. So that's one large part of it. But then there is the other part of people who are already homeschooling and they've done part of the process themselves or even the whole process, but want to make sure they're on track, want to make sure what they're doing, is fitting the bill with what their child should, quote unquote, be learning in certain situations or areas. Am I doing the right thing? Can you help me build a better routine at home? I just had another baby and now our routine has to change. Help me with this. Or my second child or third child is now school age. Let's build like a multi-child routine at home and make sure their curriculum's set. I was doing X, Y, and Z. It's not working for us anymore. Help us find a different curriculum that's going to fit our needs. Help us find a tutor. A huge thing, all age levels, is help us with socialization and opportunities for that are structured, sometimes or organic sometimes. And it kind of goes from there. Like I have no idea what I'm doing up to I pretty much know what I'm doing, but I could definitely use some advice.
Mm-hmm. All right. And yeah, so it would be interesting actually to hear, you mentioned that the reasons you hear for parents considering homeschooling do change at different ages. What are you hearing that's different at different ages?
So I'll give you the different reasons we hear commonly, and whatever ages go along with them is some of it's pretty obvious, but so medical reasons, any age, but specifically either onset of a diagnosis and they want to remove their child from school to help with the immunization of all of it, or starting school age, like my child has X, Y, and Z. We don't think that them going into a large building is best for them. So, preschool-ish, age 5, whatever. Or, I'll get very sad phone calls sometimes about somebody being diagnosed with something at the age of like 13 or 16 or whatever, and they have to, homeschool. So medical. Another big one we get is families who travel. Either they're moving state to state or moving for a reason, or traveling for a specific period of time because of the parents' jobs. So homeschooling, either on their own or with like help from private tutors or whatever, is best for them in the moment. And they'll be homeschooling and then continue it if they want, or go back to school once they're settled somewhere. And then we get the issues with the public school or private school buildings. It's not a great area, or the public school system has just not been doing very well in the past handful of years. They don't have a lot of resources, they don't have a lot of money or large budgets. The classrooms are huge. The teaching staff is becoming more minimal by the day, and all of these things amount to issues that impact the kids more than anything else, which is very sad. So a lot of parents see and recognize that where they are, and recognize that it's taking a toll on their child, and want to withdraw for that reason. And then as the ages go up, we unfortunately do get lots of phone calls about anxiety, bullying, um, any sort of social, emotional, mental health, things like that. They're having issues that they think it's best that their child reset, take a break from, that type of crowd and environment, and homeschool for the educational aspect, but find plenty of, like we said before, great socialization, um, that's put in there to make their child feel like they're around their peers and their friends plenty, and and they make it work.
All right. And do you find parents who just want to do something just better or different, like to be able to personalize, customize, the education for their child, or to maybe have it? I mean, from what I've been hearing, there's been a huge surge in the number of homeschooling families, for instance, among Black families, some of whom are choosing to do it, because they feel like the the experience of their families and communities is not adequately represented in schools. And so, they prefer to kind of emphasize certain things differently and so on. So do you find that kind of customization aspect coming up as a reason as well?
Yeah, a lot. And that might fall under the bucket of like the school system isn't doing what I need for my child or my family. That's a big bucket. It's a big generalized bucket, and a big reason could just be that my family isn't represented. My family's structure, style, race, religion, whatever it may be, is not represented. My child doesn't feel comfortable in school for some reason. We want different things taught than we feel are being pushed in one sense, or taken away in one sense, or depending on where you live and what your beliefs are. So some people just want a little bit more, I'm going to say control, but I don't mean it in like a negative connotation. I mean, like they see that their child needs more exposure to certain things or less exposure to certain things, and they feel that they're equipped to do it themselves.
Mhm. Yeah. And just on that point, also about being equipped to do it themselves, I I think one, I would guess, common stumbling block for parents, maybe less so now. I think maybe there's greater awareness of the many resources that are out there, but uh, I think at least it used to be a much more common stumbling block is that they feel like I'm going to have to do everything myself. I don't
Mhm.
remember high school chemistry. I don't remember algebra. I don't, da 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 da. How am I
Yeah.
going to do this? But I think there's more recognition now of the huge number of
Mhm.
resources, and that you can outsource so much of this, right? I mean, is that what you're kind of also seeing as a greater recognition of that being possible?
Yeah, that's definitely a stumbling block. Even still, I mean, definitely before this information overload thing we have right now, but um, a lot of people just, I uh, think about like all the different grades their child is going to go through, and I don't remember this, I don't remember that. How do I teach this? But nowadays, between people that do things like I do, or people that have websites where they put up curriculum and guidance, or online schools, or different all these different like parent hubs and online communities, it's nothing anybody can't do. And also, I think people don't put enough stock in like the belief that it's your own child, and you're kind of like naturally equipped to do this. And the confidence thing, and even just going over some things with me, some people just want to run through what they're doing with me and get like the okay that it's going well. And parents leaning on each other a lot for that too.
So it's interesting also to hear you say that as someone who's worked professionally as an educator, a professional educator for many years, that to hear you saying that, parents who know their children are very well equipped to be able to, not necessarily carry out the whole education themselves, but to at least oversee it and guide it. I mean, would you say the parents' role is kind of as a little bit of a, I guess, overseer, manager, director? How do you characterize it?
Well, I guess the good thing about homeschooling is that the parent's role is kind of whatever the parent wants it to be. It's
Right, right,
so
right.
flexible. And that's one thing I always try to tell people on the phone too. Can I do this? Should I do this? And I'm like, listen, you're homeschooling for the flexibility and the fun of it. So take advantage of that. Like make this fit whatever is going to be best in your household, whatever is going to be best for your child, for your schedule. And, making it work is not that difficult of a thing because it's all yours. So if you want to be like, I have parents that I work with who are the 100% sole managers, executors, everything of the entire thing. And I have parents who are in different working parents, have a babysitter or grandma at home, or have older children who are able to do it themselves. And they're, nothing more than overseers, and it's working very well. So
Mhm.
there's so many different, points on the spectrum that a family could hit. And once you get the rhythm, the habit of what works, that's when people really start to see like, oh yeah, I could do this. And um, quick point about like me being an educator and saying this too, is that parents also need to see that it's a very different beast being home with your children, or a small pod, versus like an inner city classroom of 33 kids, some of whom, don't speak English as a first language, have whatever disabilities they have whatever different learning styles that they have. They come from different family households, backgrounds, whatever it may be, and that you're teaching, state standards to all of these different kids in the same room every day. That's something that, yes, I'll fully say that it takes experience and a
Mhm.
degree. When you're in your house with your children or a small group that you and the parents have put together, it's wildly different, and it's very doable for a parent. Honestly, it's
Yeah.
your kids. You can gain the help in whatever way and place you need the help from, in terms of like what curriculum you're doing or whatever it may be. But that's like what parents are naturally made to do that. So the confidence there that that they can comes pretty easily once they start.
Mhm. Um, yeah, I was interested to hear one former classroom teacher I know recently was saying just how much of the curriculum in her Master's of Education program focused on classroom management.
Mhm.
And that just completely goes out, or almost completely. I mean, if you have multiple kids, maybe there's a little bit of management, but it's still not the same as, a large classroom and with kids that don't, that you didn't know until a few
Yeah,
months ago.
yeah.
Um, and so all of that, goes out the window. And I think a lot of parents going into homeschooling, they just kind of translate their mental image of what school was like. And so, okay, so now if we're homeschooling, we need to sit down from whatever 8:30, 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. and be doing these things.
Yeah,
And I think it can take a little bit of time for them to kind of unlearn that
yeah,
basically, and kind of, oh, wait, no, we don't have to do that. And even if we wanted to cover all the ground that is covered in those hours, it can actually be covered in what? A fourth of the time
yeah.
because there isn't all the classroom management. And so, yeah, I think it's a real eye opener to parents, but a lot of it, I think, comes, once they're actually doing it and realize,
Mhm.
it's like light bulb moment after light bulb moment. It's kind
Yeah.
of a journey, isn't it? Um,
Yeah. I don't really have, we work with people all over the country, all different ages, all different everything. And that said, we don't really get many people who go the opposite way. It's like once people get their bearings, and we try to, one thing we do is we try to take everything off your plate that doesn't need to be on your plate. It's going to take away from you focusing on your child. So, like getting the state paperwork, the district stuff, phone calls, all of that done, and us doing as much as possible for the parent, so the parent can start focusing on what's going to happen in the household, and then building a schedule with them, in drafts. And honestly, it might take a couple drafts to get to like week 3, week 4, week 5 in the beginning, till it starts becoming exactly that. The parent sees like, oh, I can get through stuff a whole lot faster than I had originally thought. And not only that, but then when you need to focus on something because you see your child needs more help with it, there's nobody else there but you guys. So, you see what you can forge ahead with and what you need to stay on and continue working with or get some extra help brought in for. And it's not at all the same thing as the classroom. And then, after like working on it and building this routine from that point forward, I think parents like get this big light bulb moment within a few weeks, a month, whatever, where from that point forward, it just becomes second nature. Like, this is what we do. The habit has been built. We'll make tweaks here and there, but I got this now.
And one thing that I heard, especially in 2020, when all of a sudden, parents were home with their kids while their kids were doing online school. And parents found themselves, or many parents found themselves in the uncomfortable role of feeling like they had to be the enforcer.
Mm.
Because they felt like, oh, we have to get through this curriculum and at this pace, because that's what, because they were doing online school and there were still the certain expectations. And that seemed to create considerable friction in many households because now the parents were in an enforcer role.
Mm.
And so do you see that coming up as an issue with parents who come to you?
Funnily enough, in the beginning, yes. So it's more of a question like, okay, well, what do I do if they're not doing the work or if they're not this or not that? After the beginning, we don't really get those questions anymore. So is that a coincidence? Probably not really. I think it's just something that's on people's minds in the beginning because of what they were just used to with their other experience. So, the beauty of this again is the flexibility of it. And I like to tell parents, say Wednesday, whatever, went fantastic. You got through like a reading lesson really well. You read 2 books together because your kid was just really on it. Math went fine, blah, 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 whatever. And then Thursday, you could just, your kid's not there. And, their mind's not in it. Maybe they're coming down with whatever it may be. You're the teacher, the parent, you're the everything. And so nobody has any decision to make and you have nobody to report back to you, except for you and what's best for your child and your house in the moment. So taking away this like looming like deadline or there's homework that's due by 8 p.m. on Google Classroom or whatever it may be. If you take that stuff away, a lot of the whole like enforcer and disciplining and a lot of that tends to go away too. So this is a case a lot of the times. It's not the case all the time. All the time, sometimes you have like online schools that your child is enrolled in, and parents get very worried about that. But even those tend to be a whole lot more flexible than I think like the remote or hybrid situations that people were used to coming off of. So they're more willing to be like one-on-one with your child, work with your household, and just make sure everything's running a little better. And the pressure being taken away makes the whole discipline level go way, 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 way down from what people I think it's going to be in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just on a related note to that, one thing I do sometimes see mentioned on homeschool Facebook groups is my child isn't motivated. They're not motivated to learn. But then in the very next sentence, they'll say something like, they just wanted to spend hours watching, history documentaries. They just didn't want to do their whatever, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
so, so it's not that they're not motivated to learn,
Yeah.
exactly, but they didn't want to learn what the parent wanted them to learn when the parent wanted them to learn it. So how
Mm.
do you, what advice do you give to parents who are coming to you with those kinds of things?
So I like to tell parents to try something like just try this. When you see your kid like flying with something, just go with it and let them. And, there's always, if you don't do math for like 2 days, I mean, come on, it'll be okay. And as long as you stick to routine, it's like, anything else in life, like healthy eating, for example, if you stick to routine most of the time, then like use the flexibility and go off on fun tangents whenever life lessons come up or whenever somebody's loving something. Like I had a parent recently whose son, uh, I worked with them for 5th grade and 6th grade. Son, quote unquote, hated reading. He wanted to read nothing but except for like whether it was on like an online program or they went to the library or they went to a bookstore. He wanted to read only about sports. So I gave her a bunch of fiction books that were, specifically made for kids of that age who were into sport, whatever it may be, nonfiction books that went with it, all these different things, articles. And she was like, yeah, but he only wants to. Okay, so let the kid read about sports. He's still going to get the fiction reading skills. He's going to get the nonfiction reading skills. He's going to do something he likes and forget the fact that he's actually learning from it. So like it's a small, nutshell example of how you can do a whole bunch of different things. And I don't want to make it sound like it, we all know it's not like rainbows and butterflies. Everybody has the hard times. Everybody's kid isn't motivated here and there sometimes or about a specific subject, but that's also human nature. And that's not going to be different, whether you're home or in a school building. Like some people are going to be naturally motivated towards something and not something else. And, that's just who we are as people. And kind of learning your kids' learning style, learning your kids' personality, their interests, their likes, their dislikes, using it as like reward systems also, is a learning process, but it's a good one. And it, gives you good insight into how to continue this and also like how to get to know your child better, which is like a plus of this whole thing is like, look at the amount of time you're spending with your child.
Mhm. And also, I imagine, there's something to be said for kind of building on their strengths rather than only focusing on like their deficit or, what are perceived to be deficits. There's a lot of that, I think, at least in certain educational settings, is to like focus on what's missing, focus on the deficits, but
Mhm.
what about their strengths?
Yeah, and interests.
Exactly, yeah. And so just on a practical note, you mentioned about, parents working because, or, some parents who homeschool and work, because I know that might seem like inconceivable
Mhm.
to some parents. I mean, maybe more so since 2020, but like, how do you find that parents who have significant outside responsibilities, which may be a job, or it may be something like elder care, or it may be, caring for one child who has, medical needs or whatever, like there's something that takes up a big chunk of their time. How do you find that those parents manage to also homeschool?
I think this depends on the age too. So, we have a lot of families with younger children. Uh, whoever's in the household works and they have whatever their situation is with daycare. So they have grandparents or family members with the kid during the day. They have the child in like a pod, which is always a great, younger kid situation just for when other parents are working, just because that they're with kids their own age and getting the same learning you would have been doing. We have kids who have like full-time babysitters with tutors that come to the house. Then you get into the older children phase where the child is old enough and responsible enough to be home alone for parts of the day. And they work like a reward system where the child is ultimately taking pretty good responsibility over their own schedule during the day, and they'll build it with their parents. They have input. If they're working, I have input and I'm checking up too. And you start to build trust that they're getting done what they need. And then no matter who's with the child or the child's by themselves, depending on the age, a lot of systems can be built where the parent can check in on how it's going, how much time is spent, through like parent online portals or what workbooks and books have been cut, like what's been done during the day. And it's the same as like, say your child were in school and you were working and, you're all back in the house. If that's your family situation, you're all back in the house at whatever time around dinner time and whatever. And you would look over their homework. You would ask them how their day was. You would check in. It's not very much different from that. So you're either going to have somebody with the child doing, whatever routine you've set up all together, or the child by themselves doing whatever you set up together, and then you checking in just like you would anyway.
Yeah. And in some ways, it's actually, I think, one thing that's surprising is that it can actually be much less stressful and not having to rush to get to a certain place at a certain
Mhm.
time, in another part of the city, if you live in a city,
Right.
and having all the professional development days off school, and then having to do something like, once you're actually managing it, you can make it, like you said earlier, make it work for you, and that can actually reduce so much of the stress and the
Mhm.
time that was spent in ways that you just no longer need to spend your time. So I think that comes as a surprise to many families, who
Yeah.
can't imagine how it could possibly work.
No, I think managing your own schedule a little more and not having somewhere to be, one of the biggest problems that working parents have is sickness. Like all of
Yes,
a sudden
and that
somebody's
too.
sick and everybody and the whole thing, like I got to
Yeah,
scrounge for a babysitter. I got to figure out what I'm doing. I'm going to have to take off a day of work. My boss is going to get mad. A lot of that gets alleviated. So it's like a give and take everywhere, but there's a lot more benefits.
yeah. And also, if kids are night owls, they can sleep in. You don't have to have this big battle every morning to get
Yeah.
up at a certain time. You can make it, work for their biorhythms a bit better, and so on. So I think there's a lot of things that surprise parents who aren't actually doing it.
Mhm.
And then, what about soft skills? How do you does that ever come up in conversations? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure academics do, but what about the kind of more other types of skills, like foundational learning skills, or other competencies like that?
Yeah, I mean, everything comes up because sometimes the parents bring it up, sometimes we bring it up, but it definitely needs to be covered. Life is not, kids are sponges, and math, reading, science, social, all of that is fantastic, but you also need to learn to be a well-rounded, active citizen and a person and a friend and
Mhm.
a learner and a contributor and all these different things. And that changes as the ages go up. And then you think about like the younger kids, where a big part of our conversation actually is not academics, and it's fine motor skills, gross motor skills, speech and language development, all of those different things that you want to make sure you're covering in the house, because uh, I don't want to say that it's forgotten about. It's just when you think of school, it's not the first thing you think of. And yet these are wildly necessary things to be going over, and going over them in a structured way, but then also just in a they come up naturally way. So just finding time to talk about those, check in on them, build them into a routine and a schedule so that there's time for them to happen in general. And then, like, we talk about the socialization aspect is huge.
Mhm.
What times do your children have throughout the week to be interacting with peers or younger or older, and animal, like different whatever situations you can, to give them the most well-rounded experience possible. But yeah, it's a huge 50% academics and 50% becoming, your own person.
Mhm. Yeah. And so, any other kind of parting thoughts on what message you would give to parents who are considering homeschooling but are kind of, unsure? How do you help them make the decision about whether to go for it or not?
Well, one thing I definitely want to mention,
Mhm.
I think this still is not wildly known, but some people even still ask if it's legal. And we just, always put stuff out all over our social media, and it's all over every homeschooling, page and blog and this and that. But yeah, it's legal in all 50 states. It doesn't matter what state you're in, doesn't matter what district you're in, even if it seems like a difficult thing to do, because some language does make it sound like it's a difficult thing, but might be purposeful language. It's not. The withdrawal process can happen at any point during the year. It could happen tomorrow. It's There's also nothing set in stone. I think that takes a lot of pressure off parents' decision. The system is made, rightfully so, to be in the best interest of the child. in the sense that if you need to withdraw them and homeschool, you are legally allowed to immediately. And if you need, for whatever reason, to put them back in school, you are legally allowed to immediately. It is whatever is going to, best benefit the child is what you can do. And having, a community online or like coaches like us that help with the process, whether you're onboarding or offboarding, is immensely helpful. Getting through the state paperwork is, some of it can be tough depending on what state you're in, but it's doable. Plenty of people do it. Thousands and thousands of people do it every month. If you look at the data to, total up to millions of people doing this and it growing instead of, after COVID, you would think it would go back. Nope. It's now a pretty popular, viable option all over the country. And it's growing. So it's doable. You can, call us or talk to other homeschooling parents. We'll walk you through how it could be doable, and then you can make your own decisions from there.
Yeah. And just one quick thing that you mentioned, I just want to kind of drill into a little bit because I know, I don't know if this is still a big concern in the last few years, but I know that one concern pre-2020 used to be, will my child ever be able to go back to school if they want to go back to school? Like if I take them out, am I closing the door? And you just kind of alluded to that. Can you just address that one particular thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, we get plenty of people who call with a specific situation where they want to pull out and homeschool. They don't know how, they don't know if they're, when, all of that. So we walk them through it. And I mean, you could, like I said, you could withdraw your child and start homeschooling as early as the next day if you needed to. And if it needs to be done for a certain period of time, and then you reevaluate whether this is what's best for your family and your child, and then you decide, yes, it is, and you keep going, great. If you decide, no, it's not, we need to put back into this school or help me find a school that would be best, you absolutely can do that. And it's not a difficult thing to do. We help with it. Some parents do it themselves, but it's possible at any point that's needed to go back into school or to come out of school, whatever's going to be better for you and your situation and your family, 100%.
And college, of course, also.
College, yeah. And, the college application process with homeschooling seems like a scarier thing than it actually is. Colleges around the country, granted, they do accept homeschooling applications on a college by college basis in most places. But since 2020, it's gone up dramatically. It's almost like a non-factor anymore, as long as your ducks are in a row with what you would present to the college as like a portfolio of learning and all of that. And calling the registrar and just going over what would be necessary. We do this with parents also. But yes, that is definitely an option. College, trade school, no matter what it may be, is an option.
Right. All right. Well, thank you. And could you just mention your website so people can easily find you?
Of course, everything is My Homeschool Expert. So it's myhomeschoolexpert.com. Facebook is My Homeschool Expert. Instagram is at My Homeschool Expert. And I'm sure you'll have my contact information listed where this is too.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Right.